The Bucks are on a streak, but it is not the streak that we wanted to see from this team. They've now lost 4 in a row after losing a game that looked pretty unlosable with a couple of minutes to go in Chicago. So we're going to ask a question about what went wrong in this game against the Bulls. We're going to continue to ask what the heck is going on with Chris Middleton. And then we're going to look ahead to a game against the Minnesota Timberwolves that, in all reality now, the Bucks need to get back on the winners list because they are slipping in the standings.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. My name's Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday and also find my work over at ESPN. And alongside me from the Technical Foul podcast and, of course, this very fine podcast, it's Camille Davis. And we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first watch or first listen of every day. There was no post-game show, which is very, very rare. Fortunately for me, as I found out quite a bit later when I watched this game on replay, I saved myself some real-time pain by not watching the Bucks and the Bulls live. But we appreciate you joining us today, that's for sure. And I just tweeted this out, but we did get an email from the company with just some of the numbers for the show this year. So we ended up going well over 1 million audio downloads for the year, which I think is the third year running now that we've hit that number. It might be more than that. And in our first year on YouTube, we're well over 500K views as well. So that's a lot of people watching us, Camille, a lot of people listening, and we really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed yet, you should do so. Next year, we'll look to crush those numbers and hopefully have a title to talk about. But right now, Camille, it doesn't look like we've got a title to talk about, and I'm going to ask you about that. But today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. And also, I need to ask you about a Rocky Rococo visit you had with Frank Madden. And we can get to that at the end of the podcast, but I'm very intrigued to know how that man acts when he's eating those delicious slices of pizza. But Camille, this was a disastrous end to this game against Chicago. We've been talking about where the panic meter is for this team. Is it elevated at all for you? Because you're up double digits with only a few minutes left. I understand there's no Chris, there's no Drew Holiday, but you got to find a way to close that out. What was the most troubling thing about the back end of this game? And you can go for as long as you need to right now.
It's a few different ways to come at that. So looking solely at that Chicago Bulls game, the first thing I tweeted out after the game ended was, I know there was no Drew. I know there was no Chris. Yet and still, this was a bad loss. The Bucks should have won this game. You don't expect to see the Bucks up double digits with 3 minutes left in the game and seeing them completely fold. And that's what happened. I just the Bucks are folding right now. Shots weren't falling, silly turnovers. After spending the whole game getting whatever he wanted around the rim, Giannis was going to fall, jumpers and mid-range shots, and they just weren't falling going there towards the end of the game. And Chicago kept coming. They just kept coming. They just kept coming. They just kept coming. And next thing you know, it's overtime. Next thing you know, you're looking like we're about to lose this game. And it was just kind of surreal to be sitting there watching. And you're like, Giannis dropped, 45? And you're just sitting there and you're like, this feels like a game that we're just going to walk away with. And to see them fumble it at the end there, just to see them completely fold was just like, wow, you don't expect to see something like that from a championship level contending team. And to put this loss at the end of the other 3 losses that we just had, the top teams in the East, there were Bucks fans already kind of hitting that panic meter, or just at least saying like, hey, listen, there's something we need to take a look at here. And me personally, we talked about this on Tech File a little bit this week, but I was like, there are some things to kind of pay attention to with the Bucks right now. And yes, it's amazing that we've had the record that we have right now without Chris Middleton. We all understand at this point, if you've listened to us on this show, how we feel about Chris Middleton, how important we think he is to this Bucks team. But yet and still, I'm looking at this team and I'm like, even if you insert Chris Middleton back in, I don't think that completely wipes away every problem that we've been seeing from the Bucks right now. Another game where it's like no one can hit a 3 for some reason. That's just tough luck right there, because it's like, you have a superstar like Giannis who creates so much attention, and he gives guys very open shots. That's one thing that Javon Carter remarked when he got here from Brooklyn, where he's like, yeah, my 3-point percentage is so high right now because I've never had this much space to shoot. Like it's target practice. Like I'm throwing them up and they're going in. And you see a game like this and you're just like, well, why aren't they going in for guys? Like there was a point at the end of the game where Grayson had 2 opportunities from 3. Giannis set him up perfectly and they just did not fall. And it's like, I don't know what more you can do when the shots aren't falling with the guys that you have, but it's like, this seems to be par for the course for the Bucks. And I don't understand why this always happens.
So the last 10 games, and I had a look at this. So the last 10 games, the Bucks are 25th in 3-point percentage. If you cut that back to the last 7, which is when this stretch, or last 8, I should say, when this stretch of games started with Golden State, they're in 26th for 3-point shooting. And if you just include the 4-game skid, they're second last. Only the Memphis Grizzlies have shot the ball worse in that period. Coincidentally, the Grizzlies 1-3 in that stretch as well, because if you don't shoot the ball well, you're going to really struggle to win in modern basketball. And they're at 29.9% over the last 4. And you're exactly right. The Grayson Allen stuff is so fascinating because I've been defending him all season long. And one of the points I made on the podcast after Christmas Day, and it was a solo pod, I was rambling on about all sorts of stuff. And I was talking about Grayson Allen, and I said, I think part of the problem with him is I think he's valuable because the Bucks need guys that can shoot the ball. And over the course of the season, he's over 40%. Mm-hmm. I said, I don't think he's selfish enough with some of the shots. He's just going to let it fly. He's going to get those shots up. And in this game, he's 3 for 14. And if you tell me at the start of the game that he's going to take 14 3-point attempts, I'm pumped because there's no Drew, there's no Chris. He has to find ways to score. You don't want him pump fake and putting the ball on the floor as he has done a lot this year. Yeah, he can be aggressive. He can go to the rim at times, but primarily his job is to hit those threes. He hit 2 in the fourth quarter, and they were big ones at the time, and you thought that, okay, they're going to steady the Bucks. They're going to be fine here. But gee, you just couldn't get a better look than those 2 threes there. And I sit back and say, I want to look and say, well, Giannis, I'm not sure whether a turnaround mid-range jump shot is the best shot when you're trying to win the game. He ends up traveling. It's a turnover. But he gave Grayson 2 perfect looks and he didn't knock them down. At some point, Giannis is going to sit back and say, well, I've trusted you. Now I need to go to my own stuff and I'm going to try and get my own shot. I still think he could have done a better job, but he already trusted the guys and they didn't deliver. And this is only one night, but I like that Grayson took that many shots. But geez, you would have liked him to have knocked down a few more.
Absolutely. And Grayson's another guy who's talked about a lot within Bucks Twitter. We talked about him on the show. But one thing with Grayson that's been really interesting to watch, and even with Bobby Portis, is after that Boston series last year, hearing what Grayson said, okay, this series revealed to me I need to work on X, Y, and Z. And part of what he revealed to the public that he was working on was being, if he's getting driven off the 3-point line, being able to drive, score, or make a pass. Do something else to add to the team if he gets, ran off the 3-point line. But what you don't expect is that's cool to add that into your game. But what you're not expecting is from the 3-point line, like he's just missing. Shooting 14 threes and knocking down that few, like you don't expect that to happen with the course of this game. So especially against Chicago, because it seems like in Chicago with the Bucks jersey on, Grayson Allen is a flamethrower. So you don't expect to see something like that with him, but it's unexpected. It's unfortunate that it had to happen this way. And like I mentioned before, Bucks fans say like that's par for the course with with the Bucks team, where they just have these spurts of they just can't knock down a 3. And to your point of that unselfishness, it's kind of funny. I kind of wish he had a little bit of Brent Forbes in him, where it's like I'm getting this ball and I'm putting it up and I'm getting my shot no matter what is going on, because Grayson is talented, shooting a good 3-point shooter. So a guy who's shooting 40% from 3, yeah, you want him taking 14 threes, but it just didn't happen to fall for him against Chicago.
I want to give Eric Name some credit here because I was talking to him the other day about Grayson Allen and we were just having a conversation and he said something that I thought was hilarious, but I also like kind of makes some sense. He said, if you could combine like the unconscious shooting of just not even thinking for a second of Bryn Forbes with the size and length defensively of Tony Snell, and then the actual effort night to night of Grayson Allen, you've got a pretty good player. Because that's the one thing, even defensively, I said that I can't knock Grayson Allen for not trying. He just has limitations that at this point you don't know whether they're going to change. And namely against the Celtics, it's the size. And I thought it was pretty funny just to think about that if he had a couple more inches perhaps. And yeah, at times if he had a bit more confidence, because the funny thing is you talk about the home stuff. So he's 47% from 3 so far this year at home. On the season, he's at 38, so I don't have the road split in front of me, but I imagine it's in the mid to low 30s, which it's weird because he had his big moment with the Bucks on the road when he was the ultimate villain. He's been a villain his whole career, so it doesn't feel like those road environments would bother him. But unfortunately, last night he just wasn't able to knock them down when the Bucks needed. I want to talk about the inbounds play. I'm fascinated to know what you think the Bucks are up to. End of regulation. All they really need to do is get the ball in, get fouled, knock down free throws, and we're not even discussing this. We might be a little concerned still, but we say, hey, no Drew, no Chris, this is a win. You absolutely bank and move on. Maybe it's better they lost because you're going to have to work through some stuff. But I want to ask you about the inbounds play after a message from NHTSA. Camille, you're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many as the evening comes to an end and people start to head out. You think of calling for a ride, but then you think you live nearby, you made it home okay, it's no big deal. What are the odds you'll get pulled over? And even so, what's the worst that can happen? Insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on the roads, particularly during this time when everyone is out and about a little more so than usual. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again, play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. Also, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. Peter Bukowski will have you covered with all the sports news of the day with the help of local experts from across the network. I'll pop in from time to time and talk about the Bucks as well. So check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast with Peter Bukowski. The inbounds play. Let's just call it the inbounds play. Now, we've watched a lot of Bucks basketball over the years, Camille. So let's just say the idea that the Bucks might struggle to get the ball inbounds, to me, not groundbreaking, not shocking. We've seen this many, many times before. What's your read on the entire situation? And if people didn't watch the game, essentially they get the ball. Giannis is inbounding, gets the ball into Grayson Allen the first time. He's fouled. They had a foul to give. The next time, ultimately they ran the exact same play. And I don't know how else to describe it other than Giannis just handed the ball to DeMar DeRozan. It was very close to 5-second violation there, but there wasn't a lot of movement. There perhaps wasn't too many other options. I'm not sure who you blame or what to blame, but it was a dreadful turnover. The game goes to overtime because off the steal, the Bulls get a dunk, tie it up. What'd you think?
It was one of those moments where you're just kind of watching it unfold and you're like, wait, what just happened? And after the game, hearing all the players pretty much had the exact same response to it, where it's like, we just ran the same play and it just feels as if Chicago stimped it out. And DeMar DeRozan was like, yeah, I saw they just ran the same play. So just tried to jump it. And I was able to get a good jump on it, get the steal. And, we got the bucket. But I think Giannis said he was looking for Pat. I think he might have met someone else he was looking at too. He's like, but they weren't open. He's like, so the only person I saw flashing was Grayson again. So I threw it into Grayson and it got turned over. And it is like, that's what happened. So it's one of those plays where it's like, I think was it against the Mavericks where Chris Middleton was like, I know what this in the game play is about to be like, they're going to try to force us to switch here. So why don't we do this on this play for Luka?
Camille, why is it so much cooler and so much funner when it's the Bucks that know what's going on?
Exactly. It's similar. Like it's that basketball IQ where it's like, okay, I've seen this before. So I am going to trust my instincts on this play and try to make something happen. And for the Bulls where it's like end of game, something has to shake at this point because if we don't get anything going, like we're going to lose. So to try to trust your instincts, jump to pass, it's a great play by DeRozan. As for the Bucks, it's a learning lesson. Probably shouldn't run the same the same action out of that, that time out there from the sideline. So hopefully going forward in the future, they kind of shake things up a little bit or have some different movements, some different options that pop up. But it's just a situation where the other team understood what was happening and made a play.
It's interesting because, clearly I got no problem if people sit back and say, what is Bud doing? Why don't you do something different? Like, I'm totally fine with that. I still think I was watching it. I thought part of the problem is, and I've got the quote here from Giannis, so I thought it was worthwhile pulling it up. So he says, it kind of felt like we ran the play and they felt Grayson. That was the first time. And then we ran it again. And I felt like it should have been a different option. And what he means by that, I don't think he's talking about a different play, but he's just saying whether you get the ball to Pat, get the ball to Brook, get to George Hill in the backcourt. G Hill or Pat, but I looked at them both and they weren't ready to receive the ball. The only person that came my direction was Grayson, so it's on me. Got to make a better pass, maybe got to call timeout. But I think they knew the play the second time we ran it, and they were able to jump the passing lane and get the ball. So I thought there was a few things that happened, because as I went back and I watched it like 10 times today to see what people were doing. It felt like Pat was just going through the motions, running to the corner, like he was never going to be an option. It didn't look like he was really that intent on receiving the ball. So that was one thing. Secondly, George Hill, before the second time, is like pointing to Giannis and saying, just get it to me in the backcourt. And I think he could have got it to George Hill easily both times. But that option is only there for, like, you have to go to that very, very quickly. And I think that perhaps if you're in that situation, inbounding the ball, and Giannis doesn't inbound the ball that much either, I don't think, like from memory. I understand why, because he's not a great foul shooter. In a perfect scenario, you don't want him getting fouled. But if he was going to go to George Hill, I thought it was an easy pass, but he had to do it straight away. So once he held the ball, George Hill is out of the mix. Brook Lopez screens and then doesn't move. I guess you could lob it up in the air, but that's pretty risky. So I just thought there was probably a little bit too much time wasted there. There was some options that could have been taken, which Giannis said. He said himself he could have gone to a different option there. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe you have Joe Ingles inbound the ball. I think he's probably a better passer in that situation. And then at least you have a safety valve of just throwing the ball up in the air to Giannis. He's going to make the catch and get fouled. And it might not be the ideal scenario, but at least you don't end up with a turnover. So I'm not sure. But as I said, the Bucks have had these problems a lot. We've spoken about the last play they've drawn up for different shots at different times. It's never really been a clinic. So yeah, I got no problem with where people are frustrated at, but it was pretty messy. I don't feel confident in those situations that they're going to get the ball in. Do you?
Not necessarily. It's a gamble there, but it's in part because it's like I've seen so many crazy things happen at this point where it's like I don't feel like anything is really a given here. But yeah, when I saw that particular play just get deflected and stolen and they were off to the other way, I was just kind of like that. That feels like the right thing to be happening given how everything else has transpired. Like based on the way the Bucks were collapsing, it was like, of course, at this point, we have a turnover trying to get the ball inbound. So it was kind of like, we're going to overtime for sure.
I want to ask you about MarJon Beauchamp and how you feel, because it's clearly a talking point. People are curious about what can happen with him over the next few months. And then I want to ask another question about Giannis, because I'm not 100% sure, but just this is purely off the top of my head. It feels like 39 field goal attempts is probably a career high. Was that? I'm not sure if anyone noted that down, but it feels like it. That is a lot of shooting for Giannis. So I want to ask you about MarJon, ask you about Giannis, and then we'll look ahead to the game against Minnesota, where, let's face it, the Bucks need to get a win. But first, we'll talk about Rocket Money, which is formerly known as True Bill. It's a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. And I can tell you, I got a tax bill the other day that made me feel physically ill, and I needed to go to Rocket Money to figure out where I'm wasting my money, because I need to start doing a better job of saving. So over 80% of people have subscriptions they forgot about, like a streaming service you bought to watch one show, or perhaps a free trial that's never even been used. Rocket Money will quickly and easily identify your subscriptions for you so you can stop paying for the ones you don't want. Over 3 million people have used Rocket Money, saving the average person up to $720 a year, which is obviously pretty handy cash. Stop throwing your money away. Cancel unwanted subscriptions and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/lockedonnba. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedonnba. rocketmoney.com/lockedonnba, and save yourself some cash. Do yourself a favor with that one there. And as I mentioned earlier, go to Locked On Sports Today podcast and listen to Peter Bukowski there for all your other sports news. And he does a good job over there with that fine show. So make sure you do that. Camille, MarJon Beauchamp played a grand total of 2 minutes in this game. Not much you can take away from that. Where are you at in terms of the urgency that you just need to play this man every night?
Funny you should say that, Kane. That was one of my talking points this week on Tech File, and my co-host Eric made a great point. And he was like, if you look at some of the losses the Bucks have taken, they come against these younger, more athletic teams. And you look at this Bucks roster, and we just don't have that type of roster construction. And I was like, isn't that interesting? You kind of have someone on the bench that fits into that profile of just a younger, more athletic guy. And I was like, and that happens to be MarJon. And we had a debate about, well, not necessarily a big debate, but just a quick back and forth about like, should he be playing right now? Should he be playing, getting these minutes? And the point that I was making where it's like, I'm not sure if MarJon is going to be a guy who you can trust in the playoffs. I don't know if he can make that case in his rookie year. That might be a tall ask for the kid. But we have seen flashes of him where he's put in these positions and he makes the right play, whether it's making the right pass, moving his feet quickly on defense. As mentioned, he's not great when it comes to getting over and through screens, but he's also 6'8", so that's kind of expected a little bit. But just straight on-ball defense, he's pretty good, moves his feet really well. He's been shooting confidently when he gets that catch-and-shoot opportunity. He's not scared to let it fly. And at this point, when you're looking at three-point percentages from other guys on the roster, what do we have to lose by throwing MarJon in there as well? And I'm in the camp now where it's like, I would love to see him get at least a few minutes every game. It doesn't have to even be excessive. If we can just find ways to sneak in, 5 minutes or 7 minutes or so, and earlier on in the game, before it's garbage time, just to see what he's able to do in certain situations, I think that could go a long way, not only for his development, but just seeing what we have. Because I feel like when you look at this Bucks roster, and you spent time talking about it, I think on one of your solo pods, where we understand that guard spot, that 2-guard spot is the weak spot for the Bucks roster. It's understood. I don't think anybody could really argue with that at this point. And not saying that MarJon fits ideally into that 2 spot, but if you're able to have somebody on the floor, athletic, full motor, full go, I think that's just something worth taking a look at, because it's not something that we really have. And I think the Bucks are kind of missing that juice a little bit when it comes to the type of player that MarJon is. So I'm in camp. Let's get MarJon some more minutes. Not saying that he necessarily has to, come out and play 30 minutes, 20 minutes a game, but I would love to see him get at least 10 or so, especially during the regular season here. I mean, you can see, and I think even on this road trip where it's like guys are tired. They've been traveling a lot. They've been playing a lot of games. Let's see what the young guy can do here.
I agree with you. I think you made some bloody fine points there, Camille. So here's the thing. I've been someone that's the whole time is like, well, let's be patient. We need to wait until guys get back. I understand why it might be difficult for MarJon to play if you've got Middleton, Holiday, Joe Ingles there as well, because I think it's really important. And I understand why people are impatient and they've already written off Joe Ingles, but I think it's really important with the investment, with the salary slot, to make sure you see what you've got here in the next month. I think you absolutely have to do it. The guy I'm looking at is probably Wes, and he played 31 minutes in this game. I don't think he's had a great week with some of those defensive assignments that we've seen him do a really good job at in the past. I don't think Matthews has been overplayed this year. He's played 25 games, 15 minutes per game. But I think, again, in the lead up to the trade deadline, where admittedly, to your point, and Frank makes it all the time, expecting a rookie to come in and be an impact player in the playoffs, you're probably going to be disappointed if that's where your expectations are. That's just based on history. That's not to say you can't have one guy, but the only way you'll know is if you let him play through mistakes. Now, I would say that in the past, I've been pretty strong on, well, the Bucks are winning all these games. I totally get why Bud goes to the vets and he trusts them. But if you're getting 31 minutes from Wes in this game against the Bulls, he's 1 for 5. I do not feel confident when he's shooting threes at the moment. He's down to 32% on the season. He only scores 3 points. Now, he was a +1. It's not like the minutes were disastrous, but that's the guy that I'm looking at, where I feel confident that if you play MarJon and you go, okay, I don't think this is quite working out, but we're going to know a summer with him. We think he's a piece moving forward, which I really do. I think he's an NBA player. But I think this next month is where you use it to find out what MarJon is, and is there any real upside this year for this team in a position of need. So I would have the urgency right now to make sure it happens. And again, I thought that was another game where you just find out, see what you got. West plays 31 minutes. You can't tell me you can't get, MarJon 10 of those.
Exactly. That's exactly where I'm at, where it's like, just let's see what he can do. Like, we have established what Wes can do on this team. Yeah. And as time continues to go on, he might not be able to do it as effectively. And that's just being real about it, because Father Time is undefeated. We all know that. So during the regular season, like, this is the time, this is your window to be able to use MarJon and see what he can do. Keep some of those minutes off of the vets' bodies, because we don't need Wes playing 31 minutes on a random Wednesday in December. Like it's not necessary. Yeah. We don't need it at this point. So let's see what MarJon can do here. Like what do we have to lose at this point? What do we have to lose?
And I think, as I've said before, probably the concern if you put MarJon on a guy like DeRozan, who is, who he would have ended up guarding, your concern is that he fouls a little bit too much, and the Bulls did go to the free throw line for 30 points, and you're putting him in a really difficult place to succeed defending a guy like DeRozan who scorches the Bucks no matter what. But at the end of the day, I mean, he was 15 for 25 from the field and had 42 points. I mean, if he's not missing anyway,
right,
have a go and see what happens for a few minutes. So that's probably where I'm at. The Giannis stuff, we don't really have time to get into. I mean, the only point for me that I was going to bring up, and Bud said it after the game, he said, look, I think he's doing a decent job of deciding when to try and put the team on his back, when to facilitate. I've spoken that, I think with all these injuries that just won't go away, there's some concern that the load is just really high on him. And yeah, he had 45 points, he had the 22 rebounds, but 45 points and 39 shots is clearly not all that efficient. Right. You can't say that he's not fatigued right now because he's doing it all for this team. So no criticism of Giannis, just probably my own concern, and maybe I don't need to be concerned about it, but he's just doing a lot right now for this team that's missing its key players, which leads me to this game against Minnesota, and it's pretty concerning because Chris Middleton's still out. Would love some clarity. I think everyone's in the same boat in terms of what the heck's going on. Because I kind of, part of me feels like if he actually had an injury with the knee, maybe that's better than if it's just straight up persistent soreness that just won't go away and they don't know what the problem is. But we'll see. We'll see when he gets back. And then Drew Holiday, who originally was on the injury report as having a hamstring contusion, now all of a sudden he's got the non-COVID illness again. Everyone is sick, Camille. So chances are the Bucks are going to play the Timberwolves at home without those two guys again. So, hey, those guys are going to have a shot to do something. Maybe Grayson Allen gets hot tomorrow night. I'm not sure, but they do need a win.
Yeah. In the worst way at this point, seeing this losing streak reach to 5 would be disappointing, to say nonetheless. And again, when Bucks or any team goes on a road trip, you're like, okay, well, if we win half, it's a success. Bucks didn't do that. Weren't able to get half of those games on this particular road trip. Now you're coming back home against the Timberwolves, which is a team that isn't one of the top teams in the West. Like Anthony Edwards is doing this thing a little bit now with a little bit more space to run the offense as he sees fit. But yet and still, this is a game where you're like, the Bucks should get this game. I would expect them to beat the Timberwolves, and you're like, well, without Chris, without Drew, and it's like, I think we have enough bodies, we have enough experience, we have enough talent to be able to make that a game. And playing at home, you want the Bucks to get this one.
No cat for the T-Wolves, so there's something. But we'll get the latest installment probably of Giannis versus Gobert, which has always been fun, a little bit different with him in Minnesota. But as I mentioned to you before we started, the Bucks have had a 5-game losing streak, I should say, in the Bud era, and it happened in 2021. So maybe it's best for the Bucks to lose this game, then go on and win an NBA championship. So I don't know. Maybe we're going to look for some positives here, Camille. I don't know what else to do at this point in time, but I'm going to ask you about this tweet that Frank put up the other day. The support group for those people who have to deal with me multiple times per week, which includes Eric Name, Frank Madden, Justin Garcia, and yourself, Camille, got together and had some Rocky Rococos. Can you please tell everyone what the experience is like of Frank being in that building eating that pizza?
Pure joy. No, it was really cool because I've spent time, on here recording the show with Justin, but we have not gotten a chance to meet in person. Yeah. Have been Twitter friends, Twitter followers. Me and Frank and Eric have all been following each other for years and years and years on Twitter. And it's like we never really got a chance to meet. So being able to all sit down for a little while and just kind of have some food and some conversation was really cool to meet outside of Twitter. So it was enjoyable.
No, it's something I got to do at some point. I can imagine almost Frank not talking because he's just eating and hoovering this pizza down for the whole entire time you're there. But it looked like a bit of fun. I'm a little bit jealous about that, but we can get around and do it ourselves when I get over there at some point in time. All right, weekend basketball, Friday night basketball, Bucks and the T-Wolves. We'll see We'll see if the Bucks get a win. We'll see if I'll be able to drag someone onto the podcast after. But the only way you'll know whether that happens is if you subscribe, particularly on YouTube, and then hit the bell for the notifications. And if we decide to go live for a post game, you'll be able to join us and either be relieved, very happy, or maybe enraged. But either way, we appreciate it when you come and join us on the show. Camille, you're the best. I will speak to you next week. And for everyone else, take it easy and please don't get too worked up just yet. Give the Bucks a little bit more of a chance. We'll see what they can do over the next few games.